What happens when raw street power meets world-class training? When an unstoppable force grows up with nothing and becomes a name feared in cages across the globe? Quinton Rampage Jackson didn't just fight. He rampaged through his opponents. But behind that ferocious exterior was a story full of pain, hustle, reinvention, and yes, a whole lot of slam. This is the untamed journey of the man who body slammed his way into MMA history and Hollywood fame. Introducing the legend, Quinton Ramon Jackson, better known as Rampage Jackson, is a former UFC light heavyweight champion, a Pride FC icon, a pro wrestler, and a Hollywood actor. But before the fame, belts, and movie roles, he was just a kid growing up in the rough streets of Memphis, Tennessee. Born on June 20, 1978 in Memphis, Jackson faced struggles from the very beginning. His father was largely absent from his life, and the streets became his early training ground. Surrounded by violence and poverty, Jackson quickly learned that if you couldn't protect yourself, you'd get eaten alive. And so his fists became his voice, and eventually his way out. Early life and street survival. Growing up, Rampage was no stranger to street fights. He was tough, raw, and had a mean right hand before he ever stepped into a gym. But his life wasn't just chaos. He also had structure through sports. He wrestled in high school at Raleigh Egypt High, and that's where he first tasted organized combat. Wrestling became his anchor. He was strong, explosive, and fearless, traits that would later define his fighting style. But he didn't follow the traditional route to college scholarships or Olympic dreams. Instead, he worked odd jobs, sold drugs briefly, and flirted with the wrong side of the law. Then came a turning point, the MMA awakening. In his early 20s, Jackson discovered mixed martial arts. Watching early UFC events and tapes of fighters like Royce Gracie and Ken Shamrock sparked something inside him. He realized that his raw fighting instincts, mixed with his wrestling background, could take him somewhere bigger than the Memphis streets. He started training in MMA in the early 2000s and quickly built a reputation for his toughness, knockout power, and unorthodox style. But it wasn't until he got a call from Japan's PRIDE Fighting Championships that things really took off. Pride FC, the Slam era began. In Pride, Rampage Jackson became a star, while other fighters stuck to strategies. Rampage brought violence, body slam, brutal ground and pound, and knockout power that shook arenas. One of his most iconic moments came when he powerbombed Ricardo Arona in 2004, knocking him out cold. It was the kind of slam that didn't just win fights. It created legends. Pride fans in Japan loved him. He had charisma, raw aggression, and a larger-than-life persona. He howled like a wolf, wore chains around his neck, and gave interviews that were both hilarious and terrifying. During his Pride run, he fought elite names like Wanderlei Silva, Kevin Randleman, and Chuck Liddell. Although he suffered some losses, particularly 2 vicious knockouts by Silva, it was clear Rampage was something special. He wasn't just another fighter, he was a show. The UFC rise, revenge, redemption, and gold. In 2006, after Pride began to decline, Rampage Jackson made his long-awaited debut in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC. And it didn't take long for him to make waves. In 2007, he got the fight that fans had been waiting for. Rampage Jackson versus Chuck Liddell, a rematch from their Pride days. Liddell was the reigning UFC light heavyweight champion. Rampage was the underdog. But that night, Rampage shocked the world, knocking Liddell out in the first round and capturing the UFC belt. Suddenly, Rampage was no longer just an underground sensation. He was the king of the UFC's most stacked division. He went on to defend the title against Dan Henderson and participated in some of the biggest fights of the era, including the infamous 3-fight saga against Wanderlei Silva, where he finally got his revenge with a brutal knockout in their third meeting. Rampage was a household name. He appeared in UFC video games, did interviews on mainstream media, and became one of the faces of the sport. But with success came chaos. The dark side, legal issues, and controversy. Rampage Jackson's personality was wild, both inside and outside the cage. In 2008, after losing his title to Forrest Griffin, he spiraled. A combination of stress, Overtraining and personal issues led to a bizarre police chase in California, where he drove his truck into multiple cars. He was arrested and charged, though later released. Rampage would later blame the incident on energy drinks and lack of sleep. It was a wake-up call, but despite the headlines, fans didn't abandon him. If anything, it added to his mythos, the fighter who couldn't be tamed. The acting career, Hollywood beckons. While many fighters dream of movie roles, Rampage actually landed one of the most iconic reboots of the time, B.A. Baracus in The 80, 2010, a role originally made famous by Mr. T starring alongside Liam Neeson and Bradley Cooper. Rampage surprised everyone with his natural screen presence. He wasn't just a fighter playing tough, he had genuine charisma and time. The film brought him international recognition beyond the MMA world, and while he didn't become a full-time actor, Rampage proved he could cross over when he wanted to. Late career, Bellator and beyond. After his UFC run started to fade, Rampage signed with Bellator MMA, where he faced names like King Mo Lawal, Chael Sonnen, and old rival Wanderlei Silva. Again, though his performances were hit or miss in later years, Rampage remained a draw. Fans didn't watch for strategy, they watched to see if the old slam machine would show up. Even in losses, Rampage remained unapologetically himself, loud, funny, explosive, and unpredictable. Legacy, the man behind the mayhem, Rampage. Jackson's story isn't just about knockouts or viral slams, it's about transformation. He went from street fights in Memphis to slamming world-class athletes in Japan, from arrest headline to red carpets in Hollywood. He wasn't the clean-cut, model champ. He was raw, real, and undeniably entertaining. In the eyes of many, Rampage helped shape MMA into what it is today. Not just a sport, but a spectacle. He inspired a generation of fighters to be themselves, to be marketable, to be memorable, and to never hold back. Rampage Jackson may never return to the octagon, and maybe that's okay, because his story has already been written in blood, sweat, and slams. From Memphis streets to global stardom, Quinton Rampage Jackson didn't just fight his way to the top, he charged through it. And even now, years later, the echoes of his howls still shake the MMA world.